Then I had this moment of inspiration. Remember I said, the answer is in the walking, and I knew that I needed to walk. I needed to walk on my own. I needed to walk for a long time on my own, like for at least a month. And the Camino was the perfect thing. So obviously people do the Camino for many different reasons, you know, for fun, for exercise, for serious reasons. And I knew that I was doing it. It was a pilgrimage. It was a journey into God, and I was looking for answers. Very specifically, I was doing it for my brother, obviously, and I knew this very clearly. It was very clear to me. I need to do this walk. I feel God is calling me to do this walk, and everything about this walk is trying to find the answer to this problem, the grief problem. So I chose this particular route. It's called the northern route. You see the way it goes right along the coast. Mm-hmm. The French route is the most popular. It's like a motorway. There's hundreds of people on it. And I didn't want people. I didn't want company. I didn't want people drinking and party. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to be alone in the mountains. The Camino, the northern route, is much more difficult. You know, it was even more difficult than I imagined. It's like a mountain a day. It's like 500 meters mountain each day. Yeah. It sounds easy, but see, after the second, third day, it gets difficult.
Brendan, you're in Slovenia. We like it. Je pa res, da Slovenci smo mogoče bolj navajeni, neki radi imamo veliko gor, radi hodimo v gore. Že včeraj, ko se peljala iz Benetk, pa je videl Nanos, pa je občudoval kakšna gora. Sem rekel, to je za nas en hribček.
So the other important thing is I brought my brother's t-shirt. He had this old shirt. It was the only thing I had left from him. It was you know Barcelona football club. I had a t-shirt, Barcelona club, that he had worn himself, and I brought that with me in my backpack, and that was my symbol. And my goal was to put that t-shirt on the altar in Santiago, and to get to the altar and put it on the altar for my family. That was my promise to them. So I had this everything was all arranged. I had this plan. I had the time. I had a sabbatical year. I was teaching in a Jesuit school in Galway in Ireland, and so I had time, and I had my plan, and it worked out. You know, I needed to do 22 kilometers every day, and I had this plan, and so I went to a Jesuit meeting in Dublin. I finished the school on the Friday. I went to a Jesuit meeting on Saturday, and I took the flight to Spain on the Sunday with the same clothes. I got everything in the backpack, you know. So this was 2011.
2011.
Yeah. So this is 6 years after. This is important also, that there's a certain time for things. So in the beginning, it was great. It was fantastic. You know, the weather was good. I felt good. I was on my own. I was in the mountains. But then, like most things, it started to go wrong. So I started to get some injuries. So I started off in Bilbao, which was about a fifth of the way. So I had this thing called shin splints, which is this muscle up the front.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're going to have to take the weekend off, no walking, and you have to take tablets, and you have to stop what you're doing, you know. So this is quite difficult to hear news, obviously. So you're trying to work with that, you know. And I rang a friend in Burgos, and I said to him, part of the learning was things happen, things go wrong, and you have to adjust, and you have to make the best of it. So I went to Burgos for the weekend. My friend picked me up, a Jesuit friend. When I was in Burgos, I met another Jesuit. We were having some drinks one night in the community, and I was explaining what happened with my injury, and saying, you know, it's a bit of a disaster. And he said to me this key thing. He said, you think this is a disaster, you know, getting injured? He said, this is the Camino. This is the real thing that's happening right now. This is the Camino, not the being successful, walking and having a great time. The Camino is dealing with what happens. Like, God is in the reality of what happens and how you adjust, how you cope with that. This was great. This was the best advice I ever got, because it allowed me to turn things around, to see this as, this is an opportunity, this is God working with me. It's not a disaster. So it was really good advice, because that was only the first of a series of injuries. I had like five separate injuries, you know. It's a long way, right? It's 800 kilometers, 5 weeks, 5 injuries. I raised £5,000 for a Camino, or for a suicide prevention charity. Everything went wrong on one level. There was something else happening which I wasn't even really aware of, to be honest. I get to Santiago after all these adventures and things going wrong, and visit the doctor multiple times and sitting it out and going well and then not going so well. Everything happens in a whole mess. So like I'm on my hands and knees when I get to Santiago. I'm so exhausted, and I've been through the mill, and I'm staying in the Jesuit house, and there's a special mass in the morning for pilgrims, a special pilgrim mass. And I'm thinking, how can I get my brother's t-shirt on the altar, because they close off the altar to tourists. You can't get near the altar. Then I realize the one way I can get to the altar is because I'm a priest. I can go to the mass in the morning. So I show up in the sacristy, and I'm wearing my brother's t-shirt underneath the clothes. I didn't realize but it was so emotional. I didn't realize the impact of doing this. It was like extraordinary, the emotion of being there and doing the mass. And because I was a priest, I had to say certain parts of the mass. And there's the Eucharistic prayer. The second Eucharistic prayer of the mass says, the bit that I had to do says, we remember our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of Christ. So basically I did it. I got to the altar, and I got to be there with the t-shirt. And then I thought it's all over.
So you are wearing your t-shirt under?
I was wearing the t-shirt. I'm up at the altar, okay, and I'm reading the prayer. And I think, this is it. I've done it now. It's all over. The walk and the purpose and everything. And then by coincidence, I met a friend of mine. I met another Jesuit, an Irish Jesuit, who was by coincidence was there. And he invited me to go to the coast. It's called Finisterre. It means the end of the world. It was the end of the known world, but it's the end of the Camino. People walk to the coast after Santiago to finish the Camino, where it hits the sea. So when I was there, I saw, we walked to, there's a lighthouse right at the very end, at the very dramatic place, the lighthouse, the cliff, the sea. And I saw people, pilgrims from Santiago, they were burning their clothes, burning everything, burning their shoes, burning t-shirts, shorts, burning everything. This kind of cathartic ritual. At that moment, I had this insight, I had this realization. Suddenly hit me, very emotional. There's something that I have to burn. So the next morning, I stayed on my own, and I went out to the lighthouse with my brother's t-shirt. And I burned the t-shirt. At that moment, I went to pieces. I just broke down. I was inconsolable, crying on the ground. It was a mess. It was exactly the right thing. It was so helpful. It was so cathartic. It was so moving. It helped me to leave everything. I left everything there. Mm-hmm. And then I was walking back. I saw the sea. I saw a beach down below. And I went for a swim, and that was a beautiful moment. Just the water, the washing, the baptism, the new life. So I came home like a different person, because I wasn't carrying the weight of what happened. I was free of all of that. It was such a blessing. It was such a grace. It was only afterwards I understood that the whole pilgrimage was about this one moment. It was about realizing the moment, being free, and trying to respond to what God was asking me to do, to let go of everything, and doing it through a ritual, doing it, using a symbol, the ritual, the pilgrimage, everything came together in the one moment, and I understood the whole journey to that point. Then it took me a full year to understand what had happened, to process the experience, to try to come to terms with it, even to talk about it. It was so difficult to put it into words what had happened. And then this woman that works for the Jesuits in Dublin, she's a journalist, and she said, you have to write this. You have to write this story. She helped me, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do this on my own. So we wrote, you have to write the strongest. We wrote the last chapter, which is the strongest one. And then we submitted it to this Jesuit publisher in the States, in Chicago, and it got turned down. That was the worst moment. Let me tell you, that was the worst moment. Yeah, and then she said, I'll help you get a publisher. So we got another small Irish publisher, Orpin Press. That was sweet moment. And I got an apology because they felt they made a mistake, but they took the book, and then so the book was published, an American edition of the book.
Še kdo od vas ima kakšno vprašanje? Bi vas kaj zanimalo?
A si želiš nazaj na Camino?
Yes, absolutely. I've been back. I've been back several times. I went back 3 years ago. There's an Ignatian, a Jesuit Camino. It's called Camino Ignaciano.
How many books did you write now? 2, 3, 5? 5.
I think this is number 5. But
5.
But the funny thing was, I went back, and this guy thought it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic the second time, you know. And I fell on the second day, and I hurt my knee.
Mogoče še predno po koncu bi še to rad omenil. Pater Brendan se zdaj v glavnem ukvarja z delavnicami, z workshopi. On veliko dela na tem, pomaga ljudem, ki so prizadeti od samomorov.
Yeah, so I had a whole new ministry about suicide bereavement. I went around the whole of Ireland talking to people about suicide, about bereavement, trying to train counsellors about how to speak to people that have been bereaved by suicide. It's a very specific thing. There's certain things you cannot say, you know. There's certain things you need to say. But the funny thing, just to go back to Camino Ignaciano, when I fell, I realized two things. One is that God is in this experience, and also that there is a book in this. My next book is about falling on the Camino. It is a devastating experience. There's no question. It's one of the most difficult experiences to get through. But God is still with you. But it is an experience of the cross. You know, the cross of Jesus, the darkness of the cross. The key thing about the cross is that, remember, Jesus is on the cross and he says, "Why have you forsaken me?"
Yeah.
It's the most horrible darkness moment. But that moment of feeling abandoned by God is where God works most powerfully. If you can keep your faith through that process, then you will come out the other end. Your instinct is to react against the suffering, the difficulty of it, but you have to go into it. You have to go through the experience. The other thing is that it changes your entire life. The process changes. It changes the way you pray. It changes the way you think about God. Because sometimes we have these ideas that God will look after us or God will protect us, and that's not true. God is with us in these experiences, and we have to walk through this with God, and we have to find a way through, find a path and find a direction. And it's a very difficult existential process. But it's a prayer of darkness. It's a walk of darkness. It's a prayer of the cross that is difficult. It's one of these terrible. Nobody asks for this, but when you're in the middle of it, you need to pray with this. You pray with the problem.
Yeah.
Is the Jesuit thing. It's just like Pope Francis says, God is in the real. God is in the reality of life, in the messiness, in the difficulty. God is in all of that, not just in the happy bits. You know, it's trying to get past the modern images that there is no suffering, or that we should be free of this, or we should have a happy life. And that's not true, I mean, you don't ask for suffering. It's not a value, but whenever it happens, you have to be faithful to that. You have to live it, you have to pray with it, and you have to go through the process and follow it to the end, wherever that takes you.
Jaz bi prosil Patra, če mi odgovori te razloge za jezuite v Chicagu, a so navedli v tem, da je Camino radost, veselje, a da pa v Patrovi knjigi je preveč teme, preveč samomor.
It's very difficult to know, obviously. I think there was a committee and they voted on it, and the committee was divided, and they almost accepted, but not quite. But they didn't appreciate there was a certain style of writing the book, which was not what they were used to. I think it was just the novelty, the different approach. That's right. So yeah, I try to make the Ignatian spirituality, to make it come to life. Ignatian spirituality is all about pilgrimage. Everything is about, remember Ignatius was a pilgrim, he was on the road, so everything makes sense. It's very practical. It's very extremely practical. It's all about experience. It's about how you reflect, how you interpret, and how you make decisions is the key Ignatian thing. How you decide between two roads, which way should I go? How you bring God into the reality of choosing things.
Brendan, thank you very much for being with us.